Spent over half my life and 2/3 of my adult life in prison. And during that time, I had a lot of time of reflection. And because I was an older person, a lot of times younger people would come to me to ask how I did my time or what they could do to make their time easier or even what they could do when they got out, because many of them were going to get out a lot sooner than I was, since I was doing a life sentence. And because they actually desired to know what I might be able to give to them, is that they would refer to as wisdom. It made me think harder about what I was going to tell them, because the last thing I wanted to do was to give them bad information or do something or say something that was going to cause them to eventually come back to prison. I wanted to see them be successful. And I used to tell the guys that I wouldn't care if everybody got out and I was the last person, because I would shut the lights off then. But I said it used to break my heart when I'd see guys come back, because it meant they were letting the system beat them. And so in respects to that, I did a lot of my own reading. I read a lot of the great classics. I read philosophy. I read, a lot of information for people who were known to be great thinkers over different ages. And because of that, I used to write down certain things that I came across, particularly when they were similar to thoughts I already had. And in those thoughts, there was a thing about, a lot of the young men that I was trying to explain to them that if they were fathers and they had children coming up, that they held a greater responsibility, because their fathers may not have given them the same strength and tools that they needed to avoid coming into prison. And in some of these sayings I had, one of my sayings that I came up with was, children are given tools for life by those who raise them. And I was explaining that these weren't that the fact that when a person raised you, that they were giving you all the right ways to be. But sometimes by them showing you how they were, you gain tools on how not to be that way. And so you could actually better yourself. And one of the avenues of that I was talking about is, I used to tell people, your father gave you a name that you were to share and pass on to your children. Now, this may not be that he gave you a good name, because he might not have been a very good person. But for you to pass this on, it was now your responsibility to make it a good name, so that your children would be proud of it and would be something they wish to pass on their children. So if he gave you a good name, it was your responsibility to keep it good. If he gave you a name that was not so good, it was your responsibility to make it good before you passed it on. And in doing that same kind of reading, I came across something that Plato said. And I was always very intrigued with people like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. And Plato said, we can forgive children who are afraid of the dark, but we cannot forgive men who are afraid of the light. And I understood that to be the fact that a lot of men, particularly ones I met in prison or ones that had turned to doing things such as drugs or being drunks and stuff like that, were often very afraid of actually having to look at themselves and realize that they were not living up to the expectations or even the possibilities that they carried. And so for me, I used to encourage a lot of young men. I met a lot of guys who were artists and some who were musicians and stuff. I used to tell them, don't shortchange yourself. You have great potential, but that great potential only exists if you believe in yourself. You don't have to worry about whether other people believe in you, because if you believe in yourself, you have that opportunity to excel beyond other people's expectations. And in doing so, you make them see the light that they didn't see within you. And so this made people, some of the guys I know, actually reassess themselves. Some guys found that by really putting themselves to music, they didn't need to do some of the things they had done before. They didn't need to steal. They didn't need to do drugs. They didn't need to be on the shadier side of life, because now They had a light that guided them, and that was their abilities. That was their possibility for a better future. Some of the greatest artists I ever met were in prison, and they used to sell their artwork for, a few candy bars or a few soups. When in essence, their same pictures in the right venue would bring them hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars. And as some of the guys that I did talk to actually took to heart, and some of them did actually get out and use those skills. There was one particular guy that I spoke to that I used to tell him that I could read people, and I could tell whether somebody was going to come back to prison or not by the way they carried themselves. And so I went to this one guy, and I knew he had a family. He had a young family, had 2, 3 young children under 7 or 8 years old. Had a very loving wife, came up every weekend to see him. Had very loving parents, but both of them were ill. And I told him, I said, you're going to be back. And he's like, no, I'm not. And I said, yeah, you're going to come back. And he was so mad at the fact that I pointed that out to him that he got out of prison. And about 8, 9 months later, I get this card from him. It was right around Christmas time. And he tells me, I want you to know, I've been discharged from parole. He goes, I went back to school. He goes, I'm getting ready to join the union to be a plumber. And he goes, and I'm successful. He goes, I've been going to my kids' programs in school. He goes, I've been helping my parents out. I wanted to prove to you, I'm not coming back to prison. And I wrote him and I said, congratulations. And I suddenly get this other card. He goes, you son of a bitch, you tricked me. Because he realized that I set a challenge to him. And he was not willing to allow me to be right. But in proving me wrong, he proved everything I believed that he could be.